Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, we get the right guests, ask them the relevant questions on issues that matter to you. It's budget day today, so we have a big show for you. We bring you highlights of Ken Ofori-Attah's last budget in this government. We bring you initial reactions from some key industry watchers as we try and understand what this means for your economy between now and next year. Stay with us. We start off by taking you to the Chamber of Parliament to show you highlights. Ken Ofori-Attah spent a couple of hours talking about this budget and itemized some key revenue measures which a lot of the analysts were looking out for. It had been billed as a budget that would have a lot of new taxes. Did he introduce those taxes or not? Here are our highlights of the things he said in the budget.
The following reliefs have been prioritized for implementation. To extend, Mr. Speaker, the zero rate of VAT on locally manufactured African prints for 2 more years. Mr. Speaker, to waive import duties on import of electric vehicles for public transportation for a period of 8 years. Mr. Speaker, to waive import duties on semi-knocked down and completely knocked down electric vehicles imported by registered EV assembly companies in Ghana for a period of 8 years. Mr. Speaker, to extend zero rate of VAT on locally assembled vehicles for 2 more years. Mr. Speaker, to zero rate VAT on locally produced sanitary pads. Mr. Speaker, to grant import duty waivers for raw materials for the local manufacture of sanitary pads. Mr. Speaker, to grant exemptions on the importation of agricultural machinery equipment and inputs and medical consumables, raw materials for the pharmaceutical industry. Mr. Speaker, a VAT flat rate of 5% to replace the 15% standard VAT rate on all commercial properties will be introduced to simplify administration. To address the negative externalities of plastic waste and pollution, government will review and expand the environmental excise duty to cover plastic packaging and industrial and vehicle emissions. Mr. Speaker, the Stamp Duty Act 2005, Act 689, has not been reviewed since an enactment in 2005. To realign the rate with current economic realities, government in 2024 will review the rates and fees for stamp duties. Mr. Speaker, government has budgeted an amount of $220 million to support the relief phase for the communities affected by the Akosombo spillage, as well as floods upstream in the Oti, Savannah, and Bono East regions. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the Ministry of Finance, after the visit, was quickened to respond. We have requested funding from the World Bank under the IDA crisis response window to support the resettlement of the victims, restoration of livelihoods, compensation, and reconstruction of infrastructure in the affected communities. Mr. Speaker, government has renegotiated the contract terms of the large general hospital project and will now be funded through the national budget. The contractor is expected, Mr. Speaker, to be back on site next week to complete a significant amount of work by 2024.
So that was the finance minister itemizing some of the tax measures. Essentially, in the budget, we have revenue and expenditure. Those are the two things a lot of people look out for. I'll start my analysis tonight by speaking to Yawapi Alate, who is the financial partner or financial analysis partner for Deloitte. They do a pre-budget survey. They look at the sentiment of the business sector ahead of the budget. And so this is the initial reaction after listening to the Finance Minister. Yao, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Yes, so good evening. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. Yao, you've been working overtime because of this budget. First and foremost, what was your most important sentiment before his presentation? What did your pre-budget analysis say about the sentiment prior to his presentation, before we come to your reaction?
Yes. So there are about three sentiments if you look at businesses that we surveyed or engaged, three main concerns. The businesses that we engage in Ghana. So the first one was taxation. So the taxation, we say in two fronts. So businesses were not expecting the introduction of any new taxes. It's almost as if in the last 5, 6, 7 years, anytime a budget is presented, a new tax is introduced. It may be tax, COVID tax, it may be e-levy, it may be financial sector recovery tax or levy, and similar taxes that are introduced. It's almost like any time budget spread, new taxes are introduced. So businesses were concerned that if you create or you run an economy like that, you create a lot of uncertainty for business to operate. So that's the first issue that business were concerned about. The second one was the two-thorn problem of inflation and depreciation of the local currency. As you know, a significant portion of our inflation is driven by what we call imported inflation. So if you address the problem of depreciation of the local currency, you indirectly address the inflation problem. And then the third issue is cost of credit. So consistently, the central bank has been increasing the policy rate. What does that mean to the average businessman or the average person walking on the street? It means that if you walk to a bank, you are likely to borrow at not less than 30%. Because if the policy rate has gone all the way to, let's say, 30%, then there's no way, unless you are the most credit-worthy person you find in this country or the most credit-worthy business that you find in this country, there's no way you can borrow at less than 30%. So these were the three big concerns: cost of credit, inflation, and exchange rate depreciation. And then the last being taxation, as in government introducing new taxes, and the fact that taxes that are being enforced with such rigorous nature, such that business or concerns of business are not taken into account. So these are the three main concerns. I think beyond Ghana, we've also got some analysts that we engaged. And there were a few concerns that were raised by analysts or other international reporters. So one of them being the Economic Intelligence Unit. They raised about 4 or 5 main concerns. The first one is the risk that Ghana may miss the IMF target set for us in the month of November. What it means is that if you miss the IMF target that are set for us, we may miss the first tranche of the IMF facility or the first tranche of the IMF facility when we are supposed to receive to support our budget. So as we speak, we are not too clear on whether we'll be able to conclude on that and whether the IMF is satisfied after reviewing our performance to date. So the second risk that was raised by some of the international watchers are the fact that, of course, there's intensified political activity. Intensified political activity means that the business of government will be affected. People are going through primaries and are focusing on getting re-elected as opposed to focusing on the business of government. That, to a large extent, affects the business of government. And we may underestimate it, but it has significant impact on government operation. The other issues that were raised by the international watchers have got to do with issues of heightened inflation. And the heightened inflation is exacerbated by the increasing policy rate. So inflation has been heightened, and yet instead of seeing a downward revision in the policy rate, we are increasing the policy rate. It may ordinarily affect inflation if you are mopping up excess liquidity, but we've seen that the increasing policy rate does not necessarily translate into reducing inflation. So heightened inflation pressure, depreciation of local currency, and then factor that affects growth of the economy as it be increasing the policy rate. And then the two factors that I mentioned, that's in concerns of business, cost of credit, and taxation. So these are the key concerns ahead of the budget, and we thought that the budget presentation will significantly address these issues But obviously, we are going to discuss the details and the meat of what we had.
So what is interesting, Yao, is that your survey highlighted issues that the external service seemed to also highlight. So it seems as if the thinking, both domestically and externally, align around things around inflation, currency depreciation, and those things. Although the emphasis for the locals was more the tax, and the external was more the risk of the IMF program and the political risk. So it seems as if generally people were apprehensive prior to the budget reading. Is that a good adjective to use?
So, Bernard, please repeat the question again. Sorry.
So my point is that even though there are similarities between the domestic view and the external view, the key word for both is that there was apprehension before the budget reading. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, that's largely correct. And I think it's something that, so for most of the watchers, whether local or international, what is consistent across board is the fact that taxation has been an issue. The issue with increasing tax or introduction of new taxes, and then the fact that we are still under IMF program, and so some other conditions may be imposed, and those conditions will lead to introduction of new taxes. And so we were concerned that this budget will probably lead to an introduction of new taxes, and those taxes will affect business.
Wonderful. Now, based on the expectation of taxation, what do you think was the most important tax headline from the finance minister's rendering today? What was the most important tax announcement today?
Yeah, so I think for me, what I found very, very interesting is the introduction of tax exemptions or tax waivers for specific sectors of the economy. I think that for me was a good initiative. So in my view, those were things that I think if you look at it or you break it down properly, you see that they were targeted at specific sectors. So historically, these are things that we have been advocating, that we should not just introduce tax and say e-levy, it's got blanket application, anybody who does electronic transaction pays for it. No, you should have taxes and tax incentives aimed or targeted at certain sectors. And those tax incentives aimed as or targeted at certain sectors really helps. So, for instance, you have what we call taxes that are supposed to support the green economy. So, taxes that are supposed to support the green economy, the first one is waiver of import duties on import of electric vehicles. That's a very good initiative because then we are looking at the future. That's the future of, let's say, the transport sector. All economies and countries are going towards the importation or manufacturing of green vehicles. And so you want policies that are aimed at supporting that initiative. The second one is waiver of duties on completely knocked down electric vehicles. I think these are two initiatives that are supporting the green economy, and it's like the future of where the economy will be going towards. The second one is what we call domestication. Taxes that are supposed to support domestic industries or manufacturing of domestic products. The first one is extension of zero rate of VAT on locally manufactured African prints. This is a problem that a lot of manufacturers of local prints have been complaining, that people find it cheaper to import than manufacture the local prints. So those days when we started with what we call tie and dye, there were so many of them and people were wearing them. Today, what you are wearing, it's more likely to be imported. A lot of what people wear are imported because it's cheaper to import than to manufacture locally. And then extension of the VAT on locally assembled vehicles. Now, the question that we started locally assembled vehicle was on whether the locally assembled vehicles are cheaper than what we call the home used vehicles. A lot of the locally assembled vehicles, if you compare to what people do with home used vehicles, if you import, let's say, a four-wheel drive, a Prado, and you compare to a Prado that has been assembled in Ghana, you realize that what has been assembled in Ghana is almost twice as much as what you import of the same, what you call the same quality or the same features as you drive on the street. So if we are introducing tax that are supporting assembly of locally manufactured vehicles, very, very important. And then the third one is removal of or zero rate VAT on locally produced sanitary pad. Sanitary pad, when we celebrated the International Day of the Girl Child, one of the things that came up is that look, some girls in some parts of Ghana miss school for a week or two because when they are in their period, they can't even afford to buy sanitary pad of 20 cedis. And if you remove the taxes on sanitary pad, that 20 cedis goes all the way down to 12 cedis or even 10 cedis. So removing taxes on sanitary pad is a very good initiative. And then overall, lastly, if you look at the expenditure pattern that was presented, there is significant increase in capital expenditure. And for me, that should be the way we should go in. Historically, what has gotten into problems is the fact that you spent a lot on recurrent expenditure. Your debt GDP ratio will increase because you are spending a lot of recurrent expenditure. If you are spending a lot on capital expenditure, the value of your GDP increases. If the value of your GDP increases, your debt GDP ratio reduces over time. So if you are spending a lot on capex, it means that you are increasing the productive sector of the economy. We have countries whose debt GDP ratio are higher than ours, but there's no issue. If you go to Japan, US, and other developed economies, their debt GDP ratio are higher than what we are worried about today. But they have invested a lot in the productive sector of the economy that even with a high debt GDP ratio, nobody is worried because the productive sector is still working and things are functioning. So these are, in my view, initial comments on some of the initiatives that have been introduced that I think are good and we should support.
Yeah, thank you so much. Final point, if we were to put the tax reliefs and then net them against the newly introduced taxes, would we say overall the net effect is better for businesses and consumers or worse? That's number one. Number two, can we say on the surface of it they are more retrogressive or progressive, or is it too early? So if you do a cursory analysis of what was given us and what was taken from us on a tax level, would you say overall he's made life easier for people and businesses, or life is going to be tougher? And are the taxes more retrogressive or progressive? Are you able to do the analysis with the preliminary view? Because I know you do a more in-depth analysis when you do your event later.
Yeah, so just to address your previous question, I think overall, the taxes or the waivers or exemptions that are introduced are welcome. But I think business were expecting the government to scrap certain taxes and levies that had been previously introduced. One of them being the COVID levy. Why are we still taxing or still charging COVID levy? E-levy. Are we still getting the benefit of e-levy, or e-levy has proven to be counterproductive? So there have been effective or let's say adverse effect on online transactions, and a host of other taxes that have got what we call sunset clauses. Taxes that were introduced with sunset provisions, but they still continue to exist in our laws today. So ideally, they were supposed to address a particular problem at a particular time, and yet we are still charging or excising them, even though the purpose for which they were introduced have been outlived or they are no longer tenable. So we were expecting some of these taxes, when the government came in, they called them nuisance taxes. So those nuisance taxes or taxes that have outlived their usefulness to be removed or to be scrapped. But we didn't see any of those happen. And so for me, businesses would have been a lot more excited if there have been both initiatives to address or remove some of the taxes that for me are nuisance or counterproductive to economic process of the economy.
Thank you very much for your insights. Yawapi Alate, who's the financial sector partner for Deloitte. This is still the point of view. Let's talk to the AGI. I have on the show now Chonam Klensakpelo. Chonam is the president for the AGI Greater Accra. He's giving me his initial reactions. Chonam, thanks for joining us on the show. Good evening. What is your initial reaction? I know it's early days yet. You'll do a more thorough analysis later on. when you listen to the finance minister, read the document briefly, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, thank you. Good evening to you and to your listeners. I'd like to begin by saying that typically it takes time to study the budget statements for us to be able to make comments. But generally, on the face of it, we would like to say that some of the things that we've been advocating for have been covered and taken care of, especially some of the relief we've been seeking for issues around the sanitary parts, the extension of zero VAT for the garment and textile sector, among others. So on top of my head, it's really a good move. We welcome those measures, and we look forward to being able to deal with the other ones that we've been asking for.
What was the concern before the budget? What was the main concern for AGI before the man mounted the stage?
Well, we've been very big on making sure that most of these taxes that have been introduced should be taken off. I mean, if you recall the growth and sustainability levy and of 5% before profit and all of that, we think that these are taxes that are affecting industry generally in a big way. I mean, it increases the cost of production and making the production of locally manufactured goods become uncompetitive. So really, taxes have been very big. And also, we had concerns about the general climate of the economy, issues around inflation, issues around interest rates, and cost of borrowing, because our view is that it is the working of the economy that will allow some of these indicators to be good. And so our view is, if the budget is targeted at dealing with some of these things, then it will go a long way to support us. So be as it may, at least some of the specific ones, as I mentioned, have been taken care of. Sanitary parts have been really part of our concern, because it's a big deal, and also about the garment sector. We've been advocating for issues around the green economy, ensuring that we promote products and services that conform to the sustainability of our economy. So, I mean, reliefs on electric cars and electric vehicles are certainly welcome. And also the support towards assembling of cars locally is also highly welcome, because they are part of the things that we're advocating for. So overall, we welcome all of these, and we promise that when we finish reviewing the budget in entirety, we will come back to you about our official comments.
My final question quickly for you before you go is that what caught my attention was paragraph 51, structure of the economy. The service sector is expected to remain the dominant sector over the medium term in terms of percentage contribution to overall national output, followed by industry and agriculture. But my worry is that whereas service will grow from 46.2 to 46.6 in the next 4 years, agri will grow from 21.5 to 22.1, industry will shrink, if you look at the overall, from 32.3 to 31.3. So in the next 4 years, industry share is actually going to reduce. For AGI, that should be a concern for you, that the sector that we believe drives employment is not going to increase, and service is going to actually be the biggest and also the fastest grower.
Yes, it's really a big concern for us. You recall that all nations that have developed at the back of industry. Service sector is great, but you need the industry to anchor the service sector. Otherwise, you'll be unable to control who owns the service sector. As it is now, most of these activities that control the service sector are owned by participants who are mainly not Ghanaians. And so most times, it's actually just money passing through Ghana. They establish their service points here, the telcos, and et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, the monies just go out of the country. to consolidate the economy, you need to expand the industrial space in order to employ the many that are unemployed, but actually to produce the goods and services that are required locally. Otherwise, what's happening now, if the trend continues, you will see a situation where we will be importing unemployment, because once we are not producing here, we're just buying finished products. We're actually creating jobs for all of these people that are producing in Indonesia, in Korea, in all of these places, in China, and actually depriving our citizens of getting the jobs that are needed. Besides, industry and its issues actually should remain the main fulcrum of government activities, because economic development really is economic expansion, is building factories, is creating tangible goods and services for your people to see, and so on. So that's certainly a huge concern for us. And if you follow our advocacy for some time now, we've been really big on that issue. And our view is that if they tackle key issues, i.e., the cost of borrowing money, access to financing, dealing with issues around inflation, and ensuring that taxes are dealt with in a manner that are favorable for local manufacturers, we believe that if these issues are dealt with properly, will go a long way to expand the industrial base of the country, which is mostly needed. Thank
you very much, Tonam Clens Akpelo, who is the president for AGI Greater Accra. He says the AGI will give a more comprehensive response to the budget later. Indeed, tonight's show is more like initial reactions to the budget. We've spoken to Yawapi Alate, who's the partner for financial analysis, or the sort of the financial side of things for Deloitte. We just spoke to Tonam Clens Akpelo. There's more when we come back on the point of view as we pick reactions to the budget. Stay with us.
Intestinal worms may cause itching, abdominal pains, loss of appetite, and anemia. Intestinal worms may enter the body through improperly cooked foods, dust, or contaminated soils. Wormplex 400 is an effective dewormer for both adults and children and can be taken at any time of the day. It is recommended to deworm periodically. 1 tablet of Wormplex 400 kills intestinal worms, roundworms, hookworms, tapeworms, and other intestinal worms. I recommend Wormplex 400 to you because it has worked for my family. Lactating mothers, pregnant women, and children under 2 years should consult their physician before taking Wormplex 400.
Wormplex 4, Wormplex 4, Wormplex 400, yeah.
Wormplex 400, as soon as harmful. This advert is FDA approved.
Melcom Black Friday is back, now bigger and better. From 3rd November to 3rd December, just enjoy flaming hot Black Friday unbeatable deals in all Melcom stores nationwide and online. It's time to shop like never before. Melcom Black Friday is back and now live. Terms and conditions apply. Melcom, where Ghana shops.
We no go fishing. We no go fishing. We no go fishing.
Fish Festival, Fish Festival, Fish Festival. It's the annual Fish Festival. The Ministry of Fisheries and Aquaculture Development and its agencies will hold a National Fish Festival to commemorate the 2023 World Fisheries Day from 20th November to 21st November 2023 at the Independence Square in Accra. Each day's program begins 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This year's Fish Festival is on the theme, Developing Ghana's Blue Economy for Sustainable Fisheries Management and National Development. The event is supported by the USAID, Agricultural Development Bank PLC, the Food and Agriculture Organization FAO, and Tropo Farms. The 2-day Fish Festival will begin with a float on the 20th through some principal streets of Accra. It will also involve a derby, exhibition of fishing and aquaculture inputs, fish products, as well as panel discussions on topical issues in the sector. It's the National Fish Festival. Come, let's celebrate. Come one, come all.
Welcome back. Point of View tonight is taking initial reactions to the budget. The finance minister presented the budget earlier in Parliament. We've spoken to a partner at Deloitte, Yawapi Alati, on his reactions. He says they were looking at tax issues, which was the most important thing for most analysts. Chonam Akpelo from AGI, they also say tax was an issue. Professor Ebo Texan is a professor of economics at the Department of Economics, University of Ghana, and he's joined us to also bring his quick thoughts on the budget. Prof, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, Bernard. Good evening. And good evening to your viewers and your listeners.
What was the most important question for you ahead of the budget? What do you think the finance minister had to do prior to his presentation? What was the most important question?
I mean, I was expecting a few things regarding special revenue mobilization and expenditure rationalization. I'm saying so because we know that some of the taxes have become nuisance to production. And given the engagement that they had extensively with the business community, I was expecting that some of the taxes that used to be consumption taxes, like the NHI or the GET Fund, where the government has tried to outsmart business by making it a production tax, will be taken off so that when producers pay for the input VAT, they can take it out when they sell their product. So that was the first thing, to free up some space for the private sector to also be a little bit free, to be competitive, and then to invest the savings in their expansion. I also expected the e-levy to either be removed or reduced to 0.5% because of its impact on financial inclusion, and even as the businesses will tell you, it does have an impact on the operations as well, as people begin to make mobile money payments and so on and so forth, and they think that it's even too expensive, so they decide to use other channels that are not too favorable for businesses. Then also, I was very surprised that as we speak, we are looking at raising more revenue. And I was looking before the budget that at least the government for the first time will come up with concrete targets for the collection of property rates, to tell us that we have so many properties in Ghana, and an average of maybe 1,000 cedis for each year, we are going to rake in almost 12 billion Ghana cedis as property taxes. Then you begin to give more concrete meaning to the amount of revenue that you hope to collect. And so I was looking towards that. I was looking towards that vehicle luxury tax that was removed. That was meant for cars that had a carrying capacity of 3.55 cc upwards. And these are cars that are driven by the well-to-do. So if we're asking them to pay something for, in addition to their yearly, roadworthy certificates, this is meant to be money that can go into the road fund to support government spending on roads. Because look, whether we like it or not, we need to invest in our road infrastructure. The key market areas, from the factory gates to the key market areas, it's important that we reduce the cost of transportation, because that is what also tells on the food price inflation. So if we can build the road infrastructure and make it easier for farmers or the middlemen or women, if you choose to call them that, to access the market faster, it reduces the cost of their transportation and then brings down food inflation. So it was important that the road toll and then that vehicle luxury tax that was removed will be brought back. So before the budget, I expected not to bring in any new taxes that was going to an incentive for production, but to make sure that we can collect more taxes in a variety of ways and also be very efficient in our tax collection. In fact, the same tax, the same tax Ghana at the moment is one of the middle-income countries that are paying very low sin tax. When you talk about sin tax, tax on alcohol and cigarettes. Now we are talking about the dialysis center and the need to equip it. Why can't we impose a sin tax that part of the money can go into providing equipment for such issues at our hospitals? Because whether we like it or not, health is becoming an issue. And so these were innovative ways of coming up with revenue. And I expected the finance minister to look at these things.
So when I look at...
talk about what happened after the budget, I express my disappointment.
Based on what you've just said, when I look at what is in front of me, it looks like he was reading a different hymn book from you. Because a lot of the things... I think E-levy is still there, COVID levy is still there. I didn't see too much on property tax, although it started. In fact, property tax seems to have been performing worse since the GRA took over. It was doing better under the assemblies. So maybe you are not talking to him, but what's your view around his tax policy? There are 8 tax waivers, and then there are some new taxes brought. What's your overall assessment of his tax initiatives?
The initiative that I came up with, I'm not too sure if one of them was well thought out. The tax, the zero-rated tax on production of local sanitary pads. That flies in the face of the free trade agreement and the AFTA. Now, one of the cardinal points of a free trade agreement is not what we call national treatment. Yeah. National treatment means that when goods from other trading partners enter your country, after the border, you give them the same treatment as locally produced goods. So I'm wondering if a country like South Africa, a member of AFTA, which we host, is exporting sanitary pads to Ghana. And when it comes to Ghana and Ghanaians are buying the sanitary pads, they'll pay VAT on it, but they will not pay VAT on the local manufactured, then there's a problem. If we wanted to protect our domestic firms, we should impose some levies at the border before they enter. But once they enter into your market, they should have equal treatment. That is what we call the national treatment. I'm not too sure how we are going to go around that and how we are going to prevent firms who maybe might stockpile the imported parts in their shop. But when people buy it, they'll treat them like locally produced parts and not charge a VAT. Which for the consumer, it will be cheaper, and then for the producer, he doesn't have to worry himself because he will sell more of the imported parts. So at times when we come on some of these policies, we need to look at how these things are going to generate the income. So I'm not too excited. The only things that I'm excited about was a few of the tax initiatives that were looking at importation of agricultural machinery, which is critical for our planting for food and jobs, and also on the electronic cars. But Bernard, how many of these electronic cars are going to come into Ghana anyway? So I don't know for what it's worth, why the government would want to be talking about this as of now. We should rather encourage firms that produce electronic cars to come into Ghana and then support them to produce the electronic cars here. Because as we speak, not many people can afford electronic cars. And then also a policy of the duty exemptions for doctors, for them to find it cheaper to write. Look, I'm a lecturer. I'm also playing a critical role in the economy. What about lecturers too? We are grossly underpaid. So why would doctors import vehicles and get an exemption and I have to pay for it? Some of these policies are unnecessary because they generate the sort of this thing that you don't want to have in your economy. So say that doctors and all public sector workers, then we know that you are treating all of us the same. So these are a few comments that I'll make about the tax initiatives, apart from the ones that the government has done well to release them for businesses to try. But the ones that the businesses were looking at, like the reduction in the e-levy, and then the treatment of the GET Fund and NHIL as consumption tax and not as production taxes, were the ones that we were looking at moving. But I didn't hear the government say anything of that sort.
What about the macro issues? Inflation and depreciation arguably were the biggest issues last year. Yes, inflation is trending down, but it's still above 30%. Depreciation trended down from 54 to around 20-something, but it's still very high. What sense do you get from those figures and our performance? And do you see any initiative that will further reduce these two troublesome indicators?
Definitely. I mean, the central bank has over the last year pursued a tight monetary policy stance, no doubt about it. The monetary policy rate has been used to steer down the inflation expectations, and we've seen inflation declining. Don't forget that the gold for reserves program that the central bank started, which was converted into the gold for oil program, has also ensured that the cedi has stabilized. Fuel prices have declined from the high levels that they were. And so these are the reasons why the non-food inflation has declined sharply, because that is where we normally get the cost of production and other things going to there. And especially for the other sectors of the economy like fuel and all of that, that falls into our inflation have gone down. So the monetary policy stance, the central bank's very innovative gold for reserves, and then the gold for oil program has ensured that the cedi has stabilized and then also fed into inflation. Down the line into getting to end of the year and the beginning of next year, we expect inflation to still go down. I mean, I cannot preempt what the Monetary Policy Committee will decide next week, but I'm very certain that given the indicators as we go in, we expect that inflation will hit somewhere just beneath under 30% or 30% by the end of the year. And that is a significant fall in the cedi, given where we went to almost around the same time last year, hoping that maybe by the end of 2025, getting to the middle of 2026, we should be able to turn inflation within the target zone of between 6 plus or minus 8 plus or minus 2%. So that is that for inflation and the stability of the cedi. But what is important, which it is key, is the gold for oil program. Bernard, don't let us downplay the importance of that, because one of the factors that was having an impact on the currency depreciation was the speculative behavior that was taking place on the market. So that any time the BDCs went and the central bank was not able to provide how much they needed at the auction, it sent a signal to the power markets that the central bank was struggling with providing, and that led to a lot of speculative behavior. But ever since the gold for oil program came and these BDCs are able to get the oil in cities, and that speculative activity has died down, that is what has stabilized the currency. And so the confidence that people have, and also the confidence of this Ghana going for the IMF program, which in itself also has toned down the capital flow reversals as non-resident investors were taking away their money. So that also has put less pressure on the cedi. We need to sustain these gains. That is why it is important that every commitment that the government has had with the IMF to consolidate our fiscal position, as well as build enough reserves to give that confidence for the investors that Ghana has stabilized and we need them on board for us to move forward, is key. We should make sure that the 5.9% deficit that we are projecting, we give all indications in the budget as to how that is going to be realized. Mm-hmm. I think that the Ministry of Finance should come out clearly on how much we are hoping to raise from property rates. The Minister of Finance was not quite clear. That information should be out there so that it assures the confidence that our revenue targets are going to be met. We are going to rationalize our expenditure. We are going to meet our fiscal consolidation targets. That would elicit the upgrades that we expect from the credit rating agencies. And then we begin to see some stability in the economy. Prof, so I think it's very important that we keep on doing what we are doing now, that we are seeing some gains. And 2024 should not be a usual election year. We should try to do what President Kufuor did in his second term in 2024, where he kept the budget.
You mean 2004? 2004 to 2008?
2004 to 2005, yes.
Yeah. I'll take a break and come and wrap up with you. Thank you. We're still talking economy. We're talking on the budget. My guest, Professor Ebo Texan, on this segment. I'll end with Asaki Awingobit of the Importers and Exporters Association. Stay with us.
How do I cope with this heat?
By staying 5 degrees cooler.
Body odor is caused by germs, and on hot days, the sweating and the odor are more. That's why you need to get the new improved Dettol Cool Soap, which offers up to 5 degrees instant cooling sensation. This advert is
Finally, anyone can become a house owner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You Go Flip, a real estate gaming platform that allows you to play and stand a chance of winning a house or cash or consolidated prizes, such as savings towards a house. Simple and easy to play. Visit www.yougoflip.com. Buy a ticket to enter the game. Wait for the end of the game to enjoy the win. Anyone can win. Flip it or own it. You Go Flip. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Play responsibly, not for persons below 18 years, and gaming can be...
Welcome back. We're still on a point of view. We're trying to take initial reactions to the budget. We started off with the Apia Latte from Deloitte. We spoke to Chonam Clens Akpelo from the AGI, Professor Ebo Texan, Professor of Economics, University of Ghana, on as well. Not sure if he's still there. Prof, are you there? Otherwise, I'll go to Asaki Awingobit from the Importers and Exporters Association. Mr. Awingobit, are you there? Good evening. Hello, Mr. Awingobit.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners and your viewers all over the country. I can hear you. What about you? What about yourself?
I can hear you very well. What is the most important reaction your association has to the budget that was read earlier today?
Well, Bernard, is it loud and clear? It seems the line is breaking. I don't know if the sound is okay, quality sound for you. Then we can rule. Is it okay with you?
Yes, you are loud and clear. Go ahead.
All right. So can you please repeat your question again so that I can respond to you?
What is your initial reaction to the budget, having listened to the Minister of Finance earlier today?
Well, thank you very much. I've listened to the Honorable Finance Minister when he appeared in Parliament this evening, this afternoon. He spoke about almost close to 2 hours, telling us the economic policy statement for the year 2024, telling us some of the success they have chalked since the past 7 years, and then some of the success they've chalked since the beginning of this year. I listen, and as I represent the business community for Importers and Exporters Association, for that matter, I speak for the business community as well. I can tell you without iota of fear or favor that he did not meet my expectation, and he did not meet my people's expectations. In fact, the business community were expecting, we were loud and clear during and before that we expect to hear something positive in terms of most especially the COVID levy, because it was the World Health Organization, WHO, that gave Ghana directive that, or not only Ghana, nations, that this disease was a pandemic, and for that matter, we should introduce restrictions. In fact, they did not even say they should introduce any levies whatsoever. Neither any of our counterparts within the sub-region here, be it Ivory Coast, who is closer to us, be it Togo or Benin or Nigeria. No, none of them did not introduce COVID levy. Yet Ghana, we introduced COVID levy. Apart COVID levy, we also received so much donations from World Bank and others to support COVID. Now, the same authority came back and said, COVID is no more pandemic. We were expecting this COVID to go off during the mid-year budget review. The government totally failed. And then they continue collecting. And we expect that not. Again, you remember the 2%, the special import levy used to be 1% and 2%. The 1% was abolished in 2017, the first maiden budget, which was brought back through the name called COVID levy. But the 2% was still running concurrently. Bernard, you are not a lawyer, but I know you have a friend's lawyers. The policy is the special import levy is a sunset clause. It ought to have even gone off the books in 2017. This government requested that they were pleading with the business community that they will extend it, and then after some person, it will go off. 7 years in government, they are still hooked to it. They do not want, they are accounting for revenue. They do not want to listen to us and abolish that 2% special levy. In fact, you remember, we also raised issues in regards to VAT. Within the sub-region here, our VAT is the highest. We used to pay, before this government came to power, if you used to import, Bernard, and I do know that you've or your friends have used to import before this government came, they will tell you that your import car, the car value are worth $100,000 US. The car is a brand new car, so the percentage rate for duty is 5%. They will calculate the 5% over the 100,000 and add it back. VAT used to include get fund and help insurance, making it 17.5%. Ben, I know you understand figures very well. 17.5%. So the 5% on the $100,000, I've given you a figure. Maybe let's take it $10,000 or whatever. Then they will add it back to the $100,000, make it $110,000, isn't it? Then they will take 17.5% VAT from it straight away. But what did we see? This same Honorable Ken Ofurata, think that he knows maths and he like money more than any other person in this world, says that instead of doing a 17.5% straight away, he will not do that way. He will decouple it. So he went to Parliament and let Parliament help him to decouple the get fund to be on its own 2.5, standing alone, to make health insurance 2.5 to be standing alone. Then he left the VAT at 12.5%. What it means is that if you bring an invoice of $100,000 worth of a car, and the rate is 5%, and they calculate 5% over the $100,000, whatever figure they got, they will add it back to the $100,000. Then, instead of them to take 270.5 upfront from the whatever they will get from the 5% and add it to, they will not do that. They will do 12.5 over the $100,000 from you. Then they've got the figure. They will add it back to what they got from the import duty rate, then what they got from the VAT 12.5. Then they will now deduct 2.5 VAT from that total figure. Then they will add it back, which could be the first one, could be the get fund. Then they will do another 2.5, which could be the health insurance. This is you have increased the cost of the person. To place in the name of revenue, you want to call it revenue. But if at the end of the day you even call it the revenue and then respect the use, even we have a law in Bank of Ghana says that 5% you cannot spend more than your fiscal discipline. You spend more than it. You come back to us and you compounding us with taxes. As you speak, now the 12.5, you are saying that no, we are not satisfied. You now in 2023 budget, then I think the media budget.
Asaki, we don't have time to go through. Mr. Awingobit, we don't have time to go through the history, but I think your point is clear. You are not happy with that particular arrangement, and we will have to leave it here for now. Thank you very much.
Yes, Bernard. Yes, Bernard. He cannot. The minister cannot come and he heard how.
We're struggling with your connection.
We all said that the cost of doing business was high, and so we should do something about it. This government came, the finance minister came with us. He hasn't done anything about it and left. So do you think this Christmas, if it's including budget, do you think this Christmas, Bernard, tell me, look into my face. Can you see me? Look into my face and tell me, do you think the price of goods will come down for us to celebrate Christmas? Even though yesterday inflation came to 33% or whatever, or 35%, does it reflect on the ordinary Ghanaian packet? Do you think Ghanaians can go to the market and buy rice at 600 Ghana cedis, 400 Ghana cedis? How much a carton of chicken is costing?
Thank you very much.
350. What can the watchman at the Ministry of Finance?
Thank you very much, Awingobit. Thank you very much, Awingobit Asaki, who's the president of the Importers and Exporters Association. So the sentiments are not that positive. We spoke to Yapi Alate, Deloitte. We spoke to Clance Chonang Akpelo, AGI, Professor Botex, University of Ghana, Asaki Awingobit, Importers and Exporters. There's a lot more time to delve into the budget in subsequent programs. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome